Why is there a giant decapitated furry figure behind you?
Don't worry about
I
it.
don't want to know.
From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. You can submit your questions anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. The Best of Las Vegas Award committee members came out and saw their shadow. That's 6 more weeks of Jim being insufferable. And now, broadcasting from the churn, that's Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman.
Still here.
It's time for some Pod Therapy.
So we won't know if I've won Best Las Vegas until mid-December. There's no more voting. There's just sitting around and thinking about it, which is good. I'm going to use my positive vibe energy.
But you can nominate Jim for Best of Las Vegas 2021.
Get on it. Get on it. Did you see that our podcast got nominated for some scam? Did you see this?
Yeah.
Yeah, on Twitter, somebody tagged us and was like, hey, congratulations on being nominated for Best Global Podcast in Mental Health. And I was like, oh, shit, that's awesome. Like, of course we should be. And then, like, I click it, and it's like the other, like, shows in that category were, like, how to make a sandwich.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was, like, some pretty interesting
I don't think
stuff.
it's a scam. I think
Okay.
it's a joke.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I voted for us.
No, the same people set something up for Ice Cream Social, too.
This one is very intricate, though. To vote for this one, they're serious. You got to get that social in there, your credit card number. Like they got a lot of verification steps. Yeah. Mother's maiden name. Yeah. But I got that vote in, so that's +1,
Thank
baby.
you.
+1.
Winning.
Yep. So looking forward to that trophy. That one's coming around pretty soon. But yeah, so we got that to look forward to, and our show has never been very news relevant. I think that's
for sure.
Yeah. What do you mean?
President Obama's doing just fine. President Kennedy's going to Dallas next week. It looks really good weather out there. Yeah. So not super news relevant, but something has been happening the week we're recording this in the news, and it's mental health related. And so I actually really wanted to take a second to kind of talk about it, because I do think it's a moment. It's something we can talk about that I think is super duper relevant. So a lot of people have speculated over the last 4 years about President Trump and his mental state, right? We've never really talked about it on the show. I think we have one episode, where somebody asked us about it, and we didn't talk much about it.
Did you happen to see SNL last night?
No. What did they say?
The Weekend Update. Colin Jost was like, this past week has been Mental Health Awareness Week. And then he was showing a picture of Donald Trump, and he's like, yeah, we're aware.
Yeah, subtle jab. Yeah. So the president got corona, and then
wait, what?
Yeah, yeah. Our stuff's never so news topical, but yeah. So the president gets corona, and everybody kind of holds their breath. He goes to the hospital. There's a lot of talk.
You should not hold your breath, if you have COVID-19.
Yeah, don't do that. You have to hold your breath around the dawn, though, because you never know if you're going to breathe that shit in. So then there was this big talk about, like, hey, what happens if, like, he's unconscious, or something like that. Like, and then people started discussing the amendment to the Constitution called the 25th Amendment that lays out the procession. How does this work? The president can hand over power to the vice president. They can do that with a written letter. President George H.W. Bush did that. Gave the presidential powers to his vice president while he underwent a colonoscopy because he was under anesthesia. And so wrote a letter.
Who was his vice president, Jim?
Oh, God.
Seriously?
All right, hold on. We're talking about Bush?
Yeah.
This is Bush
H.W.
Senior.
Bush. H.W. Bush is...
H.W.
Yeah, not W,
Oh,
not Cheney.
okay.
H.W. This is a fun game, by
Although
the way.
not
I like
that
this
long
kind of
before.
H.W. Bush's vice president. Was it Dan Quayle?
It was.
Ah, I'm proud of myself.
job.
That, by the way, would be good future trivia. Name vice presidents. That'd be fun.
Oh,
Yeah.
That would be fun.
That would be fun.
Okay.
I'd like
All
that.
right.
So, yeah, there's
I
a way
read
to do it.
met Dan Quayle backstage at a show that I worked at.
Really?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I walked backstage after the show was over with, and the star of the show, who's a legitimate celebrity, was like, "Oh, Jacob, come meet Vice President Quayle." What?
What?
Didn't know that he was here.
He's just doing gigs now.
He wasn't vice president at the time.
No, this
Right,
was.
No, he was doing a warm-up act.
This
for the
would be
comedian.
during W. Bush's
okay.
presidency.
Ah.
But yeah, so it had been quite a while since he had been vice president. But still,
That would
weird
be
to meet a
cool.
vice president just backstage shutting a show down for the night.
Yeah.
That's really funny. Dan Quayle. Yeah, I like Dan.
Shorter than I thought he was.
They all are. So, yeah, the 25th Amendment was created after Kennedy was assassinated. Lyndon Johnson takes the presidency. but we didn't have a vice president for a while. And so it was a great, not great, but it was a terrific historical moment to ask ourselves, how does this work? A lot of people don't know this, but the order of succession is president to vice president, and then it's Speaker of the House.
Yes.
So, that's interesting, right? Because that could be a whole different party. It could get really complicated. So the 25th Amendment came in and said, let's clarify this, but let's also lay out some procedures, what to do if the president is just incapacitated. Like, what if the president has something go wrong, but refuses to do what HW did? What if he doesn't write a letter and say, hey guys, I shouldn't be executing the powers right now. Here's the powers. Like FDR, it is said, many believe that FDR had a stroke in office, and his wife was actually the one executing all of his powers and signing his name to documents. She was like personally secretarying for him, and he was running the world, or his country, from his bedroom, and she was the only one allowed in there. So there's a lot of people that believe that. So the 25th Amendment laid this out. During the Trump years, there has been a lot of discussion where people have said, hey, the 25th Amendment has a process where the vice president and a majority of the members of the president's cabinet can all circle up and say, we jointly agree that the president cannot do his job right now. He's unfit for one reason or another.
I believe it's called the you done clause.
The you done, son. But it takes the vice president. The vice president has to agree to it, and then he can round up the cabinet, and they can jointly do that. So the 25th Amendment says, yep, that's one method, or a body as created by Congress can lay out its own procedure to do the same thing. So what has happened in the news recently is with the president getting corona, the Congress said, hey guys, this thing's been around for a really long time, and we've never done this part. We've never created a body that the Congress never did their part of this. Like, we just let it hang, and we left it to the executive, but there should be a process in case a future president is not okay. And, that's a good question, right? Because Biden is polling well right now, but he's also like 78, and so there's questions about like, hey, what happens if he gets into office? He has, some kind of bad episode mentally, but he refuses to see it, or he refuses to concede his power.
Well, whoever,
we gotta have a way.
Biden or Trump, whichever one wins, will be the oldest president ever sworn in.
Yeah, so it's a good topic.
It should be discussed.
It should. So, Congressman Raskin is actually the one who created a bill.
That Raskin.
He's such a silly Raskin. And so he created a bill to create this body. And so Nancy Pelosi got up and said, hey, everybody, here's what we're doing. Let's explain the bill. And the very first question that came out in the presser was, hey, when it comes to mental health, though, isn't there ethical barriers that prevent, somebody from treating the president against his will or whatever? So it immediately spilled into our realm and the Goldwater debate that I've been having for a long time. But in this one, I'm actually on the other side of the issue because I actually think that this is fair. It's a constitutional amendment. It is appropriate bodies of power creating a committee. So what does the Raskin bill do? It creates a committee of very high and powerful former people. So first off, the committee... Former people, now dead. So it's a committee of ghosts. But yeah, so like in this bill that Raskin created, the vice president has to start it. The vice president has to enact the procedure, okay? Then the members of a committee come together. They make the decision together about whether the president should continue or can continue, or the powers ought to go to the vice president. In that committee, there are former presidents. That's pretty hefty.
Oh, I was just going to say, that would be a great idea.
Yep. It has to be completely bipartisan. Every member of the committee is appointed by a different part of the government. So, like, the Senate gets to appoint some, the Congress gets to appoint some. And so they have, the members of the committee, half of the committee is former presidents, former attorneys general for the country, former secretaries of state, the highest possible offices that, by the way, in order to be in that office, you had to be confirmed by the Senate. So both parties had to sign off on you at some point. Even if they didn't like you, they said you were qualified. So that's one half of the committee. The other half of the committee is physicians, okay? And so there's 8 physicians that are part of the committee. And the bill specifically says one of the physicians must be a psychiatrist. That is the only discipline that the bill actually acknowledges and says this has to be accounted for.
Like Dr. Lee.
Yeah, yes, Dr. Bandy X. Lee would be qualified to do this job, but not me, which is fair. She can read, I can't. So, all right. What's interesting about the bill is that it lays out 4 possible causes that you could use this bill to do. Okay, so 4 things that could trigger this presidential taking of power. And the 4 things are mental health, some kind of mental health problem, drug or alcohol problem, physical problem, and then it has kind of a catch-all of like unforeseen circumstances. So like, yeah, the president, I don't know, gets abducted by aliens, or there's a parasite that can control his mind. Like, I don't know what category that falls into, but that's why the 4th provisions exist. But I found this really interesting because half of the provisions that, are going to trigger the 25th Amendment that they are laying out for this is the procedure we do this, are mental health related, drug and alcohol, and mental health specifically, mental illness specifically. I appreciate that, wow, half of it is our field, which is really interesting. And the psychiatrist, who's one of the named entities, is the only member of the panel who could evaluate the president against the president's will. The other ones can't. Unless you're going to hold down the president, which nobody's going to put a hand on the president, you can't take his vitals, you can't get him in an MRI machine, you can't take a CT scan, you can't figure out anything else. If you're like, oh, we're going to scan him and find out if he had a stroke that's blocking an artery, you can't do it if he doesn't submit to it. Only the psychiatrist can actually evaluate the president without his consent. And in this realm, I think it's okay to do that because he's a constitutional officer in this case. I think that's fine. And it also mentions HIPAA in the bill and says, hey, you still have to comply with HIPAA, which HIPAA allows for. You can evaluate people against their will. You do it in prisons all the time. You just have to protect their information, which the committee does. It just votes together and renders a verdict. But all the information is kept inside the committee. So anyway, I find this really fascinating because it's super duper mental health related. 2 of the provisions, 50% of them are our field. One of our colleagues has to be a named member of the team. That person is the only person who could actually evaluate the president against their will. And that person's job is to evaluate the president's behavior. And that's something that I ended up writing letters to political podcasts that I really like. Opening Arguments. Did you ever listen to Mueller, She Wrote?
No.
So that was a really good show. It's by Allison Gill. She's the former head lawyer for the VA, or the Western Division. She got fired by Trump.
Oh, yeah, I heard that story.
Yeah. And so it was this big, huge deal. And so she started a show called Mueller, She Wrote years ago.
Oh,
she
yeah.
Diving into the Mueller report.
She was on Pod Save America talking
about
that.
She's big. Yeah, she's really big. And now she's converted her show to something called The Daily Beans, and it's just news. But she uses profanity, and she's pretty awesome. But it's in-depth. So I wrote letters to both those guys saying, hey, when you're going to discuss the Raskin bill, because it's super-duper relevant, it's really interesting. As a mental health person, though, I just want to give you some notes. So I just gave him some notes, and I wanted to repeat it on this show that, my notes were things like, let's talk a little bit about how diagnosis works, because this is a great opportunity for the public to get really confused. I'll start Googling symptoms and diagnosing the president. And being like, oh, he's on steroids lately. He's been acting really erratic. He's got this. He's manic. Everybody started using that term in the media recently. And like, oh, the president's manic, And it's like, no, he's not. That's a condition, right? That's not a symptom. Like, that's a confluence of symptoms. It's not one thing. So
the president might be manic.
He might be.
Well, we don't know.
We don't know.
Right.
I'd have to ask a psychiatrist who wouldn't tell me because of laws.
Imagine that.
So, yeah. So it's an interesting time in history that the 25th Amendment is being refined by the Raskin bill. We'll see if it all passes. But the way it's written is very, very thoughtful about mental health as a huge aspect of the way this is going to be thought through. And as somebody who's spoken a lot about what it means to assess a president's health and my opinions on that, I don't think the Goldwater principle applies here. Because in this case, the only person who gets to speculate is the psychiatrist brought to the committee, approved of by the Senate and the Congress for the purpose of this. You are empowered by the U.S. Constitution to execute this task. You're working under the 25th Amendment. So I think that's entirely appropriate, but very exciting that our field is being included in that committee and is probably the key member of that committee, which is really, really interesting.
That is interesting. Now, for anybody who may be a new listener and has not heard you talk about the Goldwater rule in 2 sentences or less, can you summarize the Goldwater rule?
No.
I know, that was stupid.
Once upon a time...
No, you can't. If it's 2 sentences or less...
You know I use a lot of commas in my sentences.
You can't start off with
English
once upon a time.
doesn't have periods.
Just cut to the chase. Real quick.
Not cool for mental health professionals to diagnose public figures without their permission.
Okay.
That's it.
That's it.
It's a rule that our field follows. Uncool. Don't do it. And if you want to go back a couple episodes, you can find where I offer some insights toward a colleague who's really fond of doing that. And I don't think it's a great idea.
Correct.
But in this case, it is appropriate.
You having opinions on that?
Yeah, they were subtle.
It's the first I've
You
ever
blink,
heard
you
of
would have
this.
missed them.
Oh,
Yeah. I kept. It was very low. What was it? I kept it close to the vest on that one. So
All right.
But yeah, so interesting.
I've blocked
new
it out because my ears just yesterday stopped bleeding.
So if you're following
traumatic
the
for
news
me.
of the 25th Amendment, it is very, very wrapped up in our field and mental health, but it has a lot of accountability in it too, which I really, really like. It still provides for the president's privacy. It requires highly, qualified folks to make the assessment, to make the recommendations, and depending upon what that psychiatrist sees, the recommendations are voted on by a committee of former presidents.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I mean, right now, because our former presidents right now...
Trump will be one soon.
I know.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be invited.
I do often think a lot about that. Like what... Because every once in a while, they all get together.
Yeah.
And
You
what
see him
that's
at
gonna
events
be.
every so often.
Yeah.
You see like Carter and Bush and Obama just
Yeah.
hanging out.
And I wonder what
They
that's
seem to
gonna
enjoy each other's company.
They
That's
do.
what's going to
Yeah,
be different.
that's
Is they
what's gonna
do
And then
like
there's
each
going to
other.
be this
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
guy.
Nobody's
off
standing
to the
next to him.
side.
Yeah, like
It's
even
just everybody hates us.
H.W. Bush and Clinton were friends.
Yeah.
And like Clinton defeated H.W. Bush, but that was the joke is like H.W. Bush was like Clinton's adopted dad because like he'd call him every weekend from the White House and ask him for his advice. And Bush, of course, loved that.
Yeah.
And so they were pals. And then, Bush Jr. gets in and, there's a lot of rancor and stuff, but no, Michelle Obama's like friends with George W. Bush. Like she's like into his art and stuff. Like she bought his art. So, like, she likes it. So I don't know.
just imagine like Clinton. So Clinton used to call H.W., who was president before him, to ask him questions. I just imagine it's like, how do you get the toilet stop? It keeps running. I jiggle the handle. How do you get that? How do you get the thing to stop?
Yeah, that's probably what those calls.
How
are
do you get
about.
into the Kennedy tunnel again?
Yeah. Where's the president's book of secrets? Is it under the chair? I don't know.
I spilled coffee on it. The ink's running. How do I? That's not going to be a problem, right?
I wrote my name onto the Declaration of Independence. That was fun. Did you do it too? I saw your name. That was great. So anyway, mental health is in the news. So I thought I'd take a second to discuss it, just make folks a little bit more aware of some of the intricacies of the Raskin bill, and I'm for it. I think it's a great idea. I don't see it. A lot of people are like casting it as a trap. And they're like, oh my God, Nancy Pelosi's trying to stage a coup. And first off, she's already said this bill literally doesn't even apply to this president. Like, so don't worry about it. Like, it would only apply to the next term, which could be anybody.
Right.
Which is fine. But then like, oh, well, you're hedging your bets. If Trump wins, you want to have a way to get rid of him. And it's like, again, read the bill. Like, do you know how hard it would be?
But that's just that. Like,
and the vice president has to start it.
And at any time the vice president, get this, the bill says at any time the vice president can say no and drop the whole damn thing.
Yeah.
Or guess who else can? The president.
Yeah.
Yeah. The bill also says the president could at any time be like, I refuse to vacate office. This is not okay. Now, the commission...
Then what's the point of the bill?
The commission basically says if the president says that, the committee will take that into consideration.
Oh.
It still defers to the committee to make the call.
The president doesn't have actual...
right.
Like, the president can't shut it down. The vice president can shut it down.
He can just tweet about it.
Yeah.
Correct.
But I'll tell you right now, it's so funny because, so in the next show, that's the one we get to predict the future, right?
Yes.
Okay, I have a prediction, and I'm going to try to make it about this particular amendment.
All right.
Just for funsies. And I'll I'll bet you one day I'm true.
Okay.
One day I'm praying
Sounds
right
good.
on it. So, but anyway, so that's the 25th Amendment in the Raskin bill. Pay attention to that. Our show bringing you cutting news as it's happening. That's why you tune into Pod Therapy.
Right.
So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are discussing becoming too attached to your therapist. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's Theraproducer sponsor is Ellie O'Dare. Ellie! This week's trivia theme is 1980s Tiger Beat magazine.
Oh, thank God.
Okay.
You saw my collection, huh?
I did.
Yeah.
The June 1988 cover of Tiger Beat magazine featured this heartthrob who starred in a sitcom that ran for 7 seasons, in which he played the oldest son whose parents were a psychiatrist and a reporter. He later went on to become a super annoying Christian apologist.
Kirk Cameron.
Oh, yeah.
Kirk Cameron. Yes!
I wasn't sure until the last part.
I threw that last part in there because I knew
The last part's
Oh, I had it before that.
Oh, did you?
Growing Pains?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't sure if
Great
it was
show.
that or Family Ties.
That's where I was kind of going first.
Yeah.
If you would like to join Ellie O'Dare and make the show possible, you can go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
Did you know Growing Pains is also where Leonardo DiCaprio got his start?
Yes.
Yeah. He was just a young, 13-year-old kid, and he's a homeless kid in the show, and Kirk Cameron takes him under his wing and ultimately adopts him and fosters him.
Yep, because in typical sitcom fashion, the kids were getting too old.
Yeah,
So
they just needed to bring in the next
had to
fleet.
bring in the new blood.
That's right.
Yep.
God, it's so hard.
I remember when they did that with the Cosby Show.
Oh, yeah, all of a sudden.
Rudy got too old, so they had to bring in the other.
To have a baby.
The kid, the little boy.
No, it was a girl. It was a little girl.
Oh, I'm thinking of the wrong kid then.
You're thinking
Rudy was the boy.
There was
No,
Rudy
Rudy was a
was a little girl, but there was a little boy. Maybe it was a friend or a cousin or something.
There was.
Was it?
Would be one of the girls, one of the older girls had married somebody who had a daughter, and it was Olivia. Was the kid's name?
Olivia.
Olivia.
I remember Olivia.
Oh, that's right.
And then
That's
the Brady
right.
Bunch had
And
cousin Oliver.
She's the Cosby's
When-
granddaughter.
Yes.
Yeah, Olivia.
Yes.
That was Raven, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That chick
that's
is
right.
Raven. She's grown up. She actually has her own show. She's had many shows. It's on Disney. That's so Raven. That is her
Yeah.
show.
Well, whatever happened to cousin Oliver? He didn't get his own.
I
show.
heard that
Because everybody hated Cousin Oliver.
That's true.
you know what everybody knows what he did.
You know what you did, Oliver.
You know what you did, Cousin Oliver. Getting too attached to my therapist. Hey guys, great job on the show. Your team always makes me smile.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Here at the Pod Therapy team,
We needed to hear that.
in our pregame discussions, we go over our motto and we go over our goals for the day. Making you smile, always one of them. So here's the question. Oh, TLDR, my question. Is it possible to become too attached to your therapist? I've been seeing my psychologist for a couple of years now for the usual suspects: social anxiety, generalized anxiety, life. We've made some good progress, and I feel like he's helped me to become more of an open and honest person. I was a closed book before therapy, and now I'm a book that's been left outside on a windy day that's occasionally flying open in the breeze. Plus, I can make phone calls now. Hey, that's good. Good progress. Lately, however, progress has stalled, and I'm starting to feel like I'm booking more sessions more out of being afraid not to, rather than because it's still helping me in meaningful ways. It helps in the sense that I get to vent and feel heard and validated, but I'm not sure that's the best use of our time. I want to take some time away to figure things out, but herein lies the problem. I've toyed with the idea of taking a break from sessions a few times over the past couple of years, but I just can't seem to do it. Even just the idea of a few weeks off scares me. It's like I'd miss him, and I'm embarrassed to say that because it's a professional relationship, and I'd never, miss my dentist if she suddenly quit. There's no romantic transference going on. I don't wish I could be friends with him outside of sessions or anything like that. I'll admit to Google stalking once or twice. I do spend a lot of time thinking about him and our sessions, but I'm very happy with the boundaries of our therapy relationship. The relationship has come to mean a lot to me, and I'd be sad to let it go. However, therapy serves a specific purpose: get past social anxiety and be done with it. And if therapy isn't working to serve that purpose anymore, then one needs to move on, right? If only it were that simple. I'm conflicted. Should I force myself to quit and hope I get over it with time? Should I go out and find real-world relationships or look inwards to substitute whatever it is he's giving me that's making me so attached? Should I just accept my fate of a life of therapy? I know I'm probably supposed to talk to him about it, but I'm embarrassed. Plus, I'm worried he'll refer me out, or it'll make things awkward between us. It's frustrating. I never planned to get so attached to him, and now I feel like therapy has given me a problem, rather than taken one away. Also, it's an expensive addiction. Help me, Pod Therapy Juan Kenobi. You're my only hope. Many thanks, some anonymous girl in Australia. Oh,
I'm glad
really
this
good.
person said. I'm glad this person already said, yeah, I know I'm supposed to talk to the therapist.
Yeah.
Because I was already thinking about, how are we going to refer this person to the therapist?
How you gonna get? Also, the person left a PS. Even if this never sees the light of day, it was really helpful to write it out. Thanks for being my journal on the other side of the world for a second. Also, I'm inordinately preoccupied with the length of my question compared to other people's. Is this what it feels like to be a man? Australians are funny.
And yes.
They are great people.
Yes is the answer to your question.
Yes.
Although it's not really the length
it's
of
the
the
girth
email.
of the question. Yeah, the
Right.
width of the question is what makes the question satisfying,
Right.
not the length.
Yes.
Okay.
Anyway. So here's where I think Jim and I may disagree.
We've never disagreed once on this show.
I disagree.
We are the same person.
Um,
A lot of people don't know that there's only one person in the studio. Jacob keeps the secret.
right. I think a lot of this has to do with something that irritates me
Jim?
specifically.
Timing.
Specifically with mental health
Okay.
over substance use disorder treatment,
Mm-hmm.
which is the lack of a treatment plan
Okay.
and the lack of using a treatment plan as a clinical tool.
Right.
This is something that in substance use, in my world, we live and die by the treatment plan.
Right.
Everything is governed by the treatment plan,
Mm-hmm.
right? You meet with a counselor, you sit down, you create goals, and for those goals, you create objectives, the action steps of how you're going to accomplish that goal.
Right.
And then you've got interventions, which are what the counselor is going to do to provide the assistance to the client to meet those objectives.
And time check-ins.
Yes, and it's time checked. And then as you go through, you're going to check those things off. There may be some new issues that come up that you add to the treatment plan.
Right.
But everything has to do with the treatment plan. So it's very clear. The clearer you can make it to these are the things that I still have to do. These are the things that I've accomplished. Once I've accomplished these things, I feel like I've got what I need.
Okay.
Right? It becomes very clear at that point where you're at in the treatment process. Mental health, in my opinion, has kind of been late to adapt this. Because...
we have treatment plans, right?
Yes, and they're shit. Okay? I'm sorry. They are.
No, we don't have an auditing entity that checks them.
Okay.
My
here's the
treatment
thing.
plans are written in pen.
Hooray.
And I use stickers.
And are they ever reviewed?
I mean,
That's the thing that happens. I see this a lot with providers that are mental health providers that want to get into providing substance use treatment. This is the biggest challenge that they have.
Yeah, they're not
because
used to
the
it.
mental health world, you're used to writing a treatment plan at the beginning and then you put it away. And then you don't really, maybe you'll bring it out in 90 days because your pay source wants to know an update.
Right.
But that's about it. And a lot of the goals and objectives aren't very action step oriented.
Okay.
They're not quite as clear. Now hold on. I see you getting frustrated
I feel like
over there.
you're just using this question to just beat
and
me
you know
up.
what? You know what?
I just don't even think it's relevant.
So that's how it feels then, doesn't it, Jim?
When you're talking about Nevada State College?
Yes, I am.
Is this about the
Where
college?
you just show up and just start attacking people? Yeah.
That's a good point.
This is what it's like.
All right, that's fine.
All right, so
take my lumps.
Take your medicine.
Yeah, that's fine.
So, but
overdue.
this is what I would like to see more of in mental health. I'd
Yes.
like to see more of, okay, so you come in to work on anxiety issues.
Right.
Let's identify clearly what that means for you so we know when we're done.
Okay.
Because I think that's what's missing, is you get to a point where it's not really clear whether or not you've met your goal. And then you kind of keep going back into therapy, not because you're still working on the goal, but just because you don't know if you're working on it.
Yeah. All right. Are you open to feedback?
Yes. Okay, go ahead.
I have 3 points.
I mean, no, I'm not.
I also have them alphabetized. All right. Here's the first thing. I think your general criticism of, hey, mental health folks don't do rigorous training on treatment planning, I think it's fair criticism. And I'll admit that. I'm dual licensed. I learned more about treatment planning in my substance abuse internship than I ever did in anything else I did. In my entire master's, we barely talked about it, Mm-hmm. And then in my pre-licensure and all that crap. So I concede. I think that's absolutely true.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Great show. Great show. That was fun. Let the confetti fall. I do think there's 2 pieces of this that are not totally fair, though. One of them is a defense of your criticism. The other one relates right back to the letter, okay? So the first thing, substance abuse treatment has binary qualities that mental health treatment does not have. Either you are sober or you are not.
Disagree.
Okay, there's stages of relapse, right? Okay, that's fine. But your treatment plan is going to have components in there that are binary, that we can see whether or not you're doing that, which is fine. That's partly what treatment plans are supposed to language, right? But if somebody has social anxiety, that's an ongoing chronic condition. And so I think that there's two different discussions being had here. You're talking about treatment plans being a useful mechanism for timetabling a patient. That's fine, and I don't even disagree with you on that. I would argue that gets a little bit away from the letter, though. That's a good preface point, but I think like the letter, she could have had a treatment plan. We could interview that clinician. They'll be like, she's in maintenance. Or if I'm your patient, I'm an alcoholic, and you categorize me as alcohol use in remission. And I say, hey, listen, I'm private pay. You don't have to satisfy anybody else. Keep me sober. Well, Jim, at some point I don't want to be in your life. I know, but like I consider myself alcohol in remission. I live in Las Vegas. I'm a bartender. I just would like to continue our meetings. That's good for my health. You wouldn't fire me. I don't know. Maybe you would. What's your philosophy on that? Or would you say, okay?
I would still say, okay, what are we going to work on?
That's fine.
She
has
but
goals
there's
with
still.
him. She's just saying we're stagnating, but she says we have goals. We have identified goals. He probably has a treatment plan.
Yeah, maybe they have goals, but they clearly don't have objectives. Okay,
well,
that's
I don't think it's
no.
fair.
I think that is fair. I think it's
patients
very fair.
sometimes stagnate, and it can be a
Of
long-term
course.
treatment.
I'm not.
That doesn't mean that the
saying
therapist has failed.
I'm
The
not
question
saying the
is-
therapist has failed.
Sounds like that's what you're saying.
No, I'm saying that this happens most often. I see this happening a lot with folks. When you ask somebody who's in treatment for mental health,
Okay.
and you ask them, what are your treatment plan goals? Like, what are the things that you're working on? I come across this a lot where I hear people say, well, just they'll name like a disorder.
Right.
Well, my anxiety. Okay, well, what are you working on with that anxiety?
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing between sessions? What are the things that you are going to do, and how do you know when you're done? Like, that's the thing that's missing, is how do you know when you've accomplished what you set out to accomplish? And I'm not saying that it's binary in the sense that, okay, no more social anxiety, I'm done.
Right.
But what is the purpose of therapy for you? How do you get to that point where you can say, okay, now I know I've got it from here because I've met X, Y, and Z expectations.
This is a good discussion, and I want to steer back to our writer, but in a recent conference that I was a part of, there's a clinician who you and I both know, very respected person, is another one of the speakers. I won't name drop. But that individual, as part of their talk, wanted to take a second to get on a soapbox about their view about discontinuing therapy. Mm-hmm. And their view was I'm not saying your view is this is their view, but their view was very strict. And it was like, listen, we identify the problem, we have a treatment plan, we follow this recipe, and after about 4 or 6 sessions, I'm going to ask you, why are you still here? I don't want to become a maintenance strategy for you. I want you out the door. Mm-hmm. And they had a whole soapbox about that and believed that was what it means to honor the patient's work and that you had ethical burdens that should make you do that. I don't agree with that.
Okay.
I have philosophical disagreements with that. And part of it goes back to the Code of Ethics. One of the pretenses of the Code of Ethics is autonomy. I believe the patient has the autonomy to tell me what they're here for. And if I disagree with those terms, that's okay. But if you come to me and your presenting problem is anxiety, okay, and we've made some good progress on that, from time to time, we should check in about new goals. I think that's good. I like refreshing a treatment plan. I'm good with that. But I still defer to your autonomy. And so if you say, this is good for me, Jim, I've come a long way, but this is good for my maintenance and my mental health. Our new goal is to help me maintenance my life and help me. This is a place where I'm going to use it as a pressure valve and a place for consultation and healthy collaboration. That is your new goal, therapist. Execute. It is. I believe it is an infringement on the autonomy of the patient to say, no, get out. Okay. Now, if I'm an insurance-based therapist, I think that I do have a financial temptation to do that. And this particular therapist didn't mention that, but I felt like, that philosophy is born inside of the world of the payer, of the third-party payer. Because in a third-party payer world, you have to justify treatment all the time.
Right.
And it's a lot more financially smart to complete treatment, discontinue the patient, and take a new intake and keep the cycle going. Even if you take that same patient 30 days later after you've DC'd them, after you've done a termination session, you are actually in a better financial position for that because you're going to get a new PAR and you're going to get insurances to approve the course of treatment for the next go instead of continuing the last one.
Right.
So I feel it's disingenuous when therapists talk as if that's this ethical burden when really it's just conveniently the burden that meets the payer's expectations.
Well, but I do think, though, I guess
my payer is the patient. I want to meet their expectations.
My philosophy of that is very similar to, if you were teaching your kid how to ride a bicycle without training wheels for the first time.
Right.
You are there to support them. You hold them up so they don't fall. But once they have it, you become a burden to them if you hold on
there
longer
are cases like
after that point. So
I take it case by case.
Yes, exactly. So in your example, then how do you as the clinician determine, am I still helping this person?
Yeah.
Or is this person now too dependent on
So
me?
let me give you feedback to that, because no, I want it to be clear. Like, I like how you just said that, because I don't think it's a binary choice in this situation either. I don't think it's either you're hard, strict, cut people off, or you're stringing them along forever.
Right.
I don't believe in either. I believe that it's case by case. And hopefully you're a really good clinician. You know your patient really well, and you can start to detect, hey, this is becoming dependence. And so for me, I always have a gentle nudge inside of me where I'm starting to tell them, hey, I've been noticing that you're doing really good. When we're connecting, we're seeing less and less of the presenting problem. What I'd like to do is talk about the next phase. And they're like, what are you doing, Jim? You breaking up with me? Sometimes I have that person who's like, what does this mean? And I'm like, I see you every week right now. I'd like to see you every 2 weeks.
Right.
And then, you know what? Let's try that for a while. If that's going good, we'll stop in once a month. And I'm not going to disappear from your life. I'm your therapist. You have my number. Call me whenever. Some people I'll start to see once a year. You know, they'll just pop in, update their case, let me know how things are going with them and their family. And then I'm PRN. Mm-hmm. I'm their safety valve. If things get out of control, hey, I have a therapist. He knows me.
You're
I'll
what?
pop in there. PRN?
As needed.
As
Gotcha.
needed. Yeah. So I'm good with that. So I do follow the guidelines of that. I do agree with your bike metaphor, that I do think that there can be a codependence that develops, and sometimes that's not the case, that you should be doing that. Mm-hmm. But I also defer to the autonomy of the patient. And I've had patients, I don't have any currently in my cases like this, but in my career, I've had patients that have stuck around, you know, for a while after the presenting problem disappeared, because new things started happening in their lives. Like, they have a family member gets cancer. Now we're dealing with that. And like, they just say, you know, Jim, you're part of my inner circle. You're my helper. Like, this is my safe place, and this is good for me to be the best dad that I can be, or whatever. And it's like, okay, that's fine. I believe in the autonomy of the patient to choose that. But I'm always checking in with them every so often in a cycle to say, how are we doing? What are we working on? Mm-hmm. Would you like to slow things down? And so, like, I'm always pushing for that.
So I guess to the writer.
Yeah, we should probably talk to the writer.
I suppose.
We're sitting here discussing shop. Sorry, writer. You provoked this.
I think here's what I would do. If you have a treatment plan, what I would do is I would sit down with your therapist and review it. Okay. And I would say, okay, can we review what's on my treatment plan? Can we just do a status check of where we're at on my goals, the things that I wanted to accomplish, you know, and then maybe that will help identify some things as you're reviewing that, and you realize, like, oh, you know what, I haven't made as much progress as I thought on this one particular thing. I've made great progress on these other things. So now that's good information, because now I know this is where we need to focus on. So maybe we need to focus on this area here. So now you've got some direction that you can say, in our future sessions, these are the things that I want to focus on.
Yeah.
And if you have gotten to that point where you feel like you've made substantial progress on all of these goals, then maybe that's when you have a conversation, like, okay, with your therapist, like, well, what's the next step from here? You know, is this where I start phasing out? Is this where I start, you know, we start decreasing our sessions? Or are there other things that maybe I'm missing that we need to continue to work on? And just have that discussion. And I don't think it's a discussion that your therapist is going to be, I don't think it's going to make anything awkward.
No, not at all.
I think that's kind of what they probably are anticipating.
Oh, they're super comfortable with it.
I mean, she's been in therapy for 2 years.
So 2 years, yeah.
So I that's what I would say. I would say have a discussion about your goals and objectives, what it is that you are actively doing, review those, see where your status is on those.
Yeah.
And if you want to make some new goals and objectives, then at least then that gives you some direction. So you feel like you're accomplishing something. And if you realize, like, oh, I think I'm doing good, then maybe we can say, all right, can we go 2 weeks?
Yes.
And then
Slow down.
You can start phasing out. And then so you're not really, you know, it's not like, going back to my bike metaphor, it's not like the parent is just letting go and running away from the bike.
No.
They'll just slowly let go and run alongside for a while, you know, there to catch you if you need you.
Yeah.
If they need to.
Yeah. I like that. So I think, Ryder, what Nick's teaching you is one of your questions was, how do you talk to this with your clinician? How do you talk to this with your therapist without it being awkward? And I think Nick's giving you that door and teaching you, hey, in our land, all you have to do is say, hey, in an upcoming session, I'd like to kind of go over our treatment plan goals and how I'm doing and how you feel about my progress. That's all you got to say. That's the pitch. And the therapist will hear you, and they'll understand exactly what you're going for, and they'll come back and say, great, let's discuss that. And in the next session or whatever, they'll say, so you asked this question. Here's kind of where I see your goals. Here's how I see your progress. And then that's an opportunity for you to say, yeah, let's talk about how often we meet and what we're going for. Now, that answers that question. I want to speak to some other ones you asked. Is it inappropriate to get too attached to your therapist? In your letter, you do a good job of teaching us how attached you are. And you're very good about it. Yeah, you do a good job of saying like, hey, look, it's not romantic. Mm-hmm. It's just this person really occupies space in my mind. They are a fixture. And let's be honest. How many adults do you sit down with 1 hour a week for 2 years and have meaningful, thoughtful, healthy dialogue that is you-focused and trying to bring out the best version of you? I sure as hell hope you've developed a good connection with this human being. I think that's entirely appropriate. So there's nothing about this that's off-putting to me. I want the public to hear it's okay for you to feel very close to your therapist. It's okay for you to think of your therapist and say, you know what, I think of this person as a friend, or I think of them in a friendly way, though the writer says, I still understand their role as a professional. And that's okay. We have good boundaries, but it's okay to like your therapist. It's okay to be friendly with them. Hopefully they're warm and gregarious and put you at ease. So everything you said, writer, is okay. The second thing that I want the public to hear, and I want the writer to hear, it's okay if you're a human being who realizes that long-term regular therapy is a good thing for your life. You're allowed to choose that. I believe in your power as a patient to choose that. There are some therapists that will say, that's not my model. And that's okay. They're allowed to tell you that, and it's possible that they might refer you out, or they might say, that's fine, let's take more of a maintenance posture, which might not be weekly, unless it needs to be, unless that's where you're at. There are people who are going to have chronic, long-term situations in life, and they benefit from this. There are folks that don't necessarily have a mental illness, but they get into therapy, they realize this brings out a good part of them, it's fine. There is nothing wrong with electively accessing healthcare, especially this part of it. I'm fine with that. I believe you have the right to choose that. Keep in mind, there are other things that matter too, like insurances might not support you in that, and the therapist, that might not be their model. I'm fine with that model. I have colleagues they're not comfortable with that. They would feel like they're doing you a disservice. And that's fine. Clinicians can have an honest philosophical disagreement and still be really good at what they do. So, I think that it goes both ways on that. But to the writer, I'm good with your attachment level with the therapist. I'm good with the idea of long-term therapy. I think that's fine for some folks. And the third thing is, you're telling us in your letter, I'm starting to feel itchy. I kind of don't think this is good for me anymore. I'm just getting stuck. And that's where I defer back to Nick's suggestion. The door to enter to restart this conversation is probably the question about treatment plans and goals.
And if you don't have a treatment plan, or you've accomplished everything on your treatment plan, create an aftercare plan.
That's good. Yeah, or a transition plan,
Yep.
And again, an aftercare plan can include, I'm still going to see you as a patient.
Sure.
You're going to pop in quarterly, monthly, whatever, or we're going to start slowing it down. That's totally fine. Mm-hmm. And it's probably a good stretching exercise for you, writer, to take a break or to start slowing down therapy, because then we get to see how you cope on your own without this. And, again, it's a precarious balance. I always want to defer to you and your therapist. I don't like getting in between you and your therapist and telling you how you should feel or what your coping skills ought to be at. You have a 2-year invested clinician who's better at knowing you than I am.
Good point. These are just two assholes in Las Vegas.
Absolutely. Emphasis on the assholes. So, we, both of us, are just giving you tools and suggestions for how to better talk to your therapist. That's what we're offering you. But we want to encourage you to talk to your therapist, because that person's an expert on you. We trust their ethics. We trust their licensure. We trust their understanding of you. And I think that they know best. And so talk to them about it, because clearly you've developed trust. Mm-hmm. And your nervousness is natural. I think everybody is. But Nick's giving you a great tool to talk about that in a way that doesn't, feel icky or awkward.
Yeah.
So just discuss the treatment plan. Say, hey, what's our goals? And I just wanted to revisit, what our master plan is and how we're working on things, because, I just want to be thinking about that. Mm-hmm. Great. I think that's a very healthy thing. But I'm glad you're pro-mental health, writer, and really glad that you're in Australia. Please feel free to set me up with a speaking gig at any Australian university. Definitely don't listen to the pre-show. Do not go to patreon.com/therapy and find out how my speaking gigs go. Just go ahead and set me up. It'll be fine. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to discuss obsessive thoughts. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's Therapy Producer sponsor is Judy Schneider.
Judy!
Today's second trivia question in honor of Therapy Producer Judy is... The same June 1988 cover of Tiger Beat magazine also featured this young movie actor who later went on to play a young Indiana Jones before sadly losing his life to a drug overdose.
What? Somebody played Indiana Jones and died?
Yep.
Harrison Ford is dead?
Indiana Jones' Last Crusade.
Yep.
What?
You probably know his younger brother.
Oh, is it River Phoenix?
River Phoenix.
Oh,
River Phoenix.
Wow. And the opening and the opening part of Indiana Jones' Last Crusade, he's the young Indiana Jones.
That's where he gets the hat.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you'd like to join Judy Schneider and make the show possible, go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
Wow.
I made those too easy.
Not
really.
Yeah,
those are easy ones.
Yep. Well, I mean, for those
Search!
who read Teen Beat magazine, I mean, that was pretty easy. Obsessive thoughts. Quick question. How do I stop obsessing over one thought over and over again?
Think more about Tiger Beat magazine.
I think that's the simple answer.
Tiger Beat magazine does solve a lot of problems.
It covers a multitude of sins.
I mean, usually we go deep into into these questions
Get you a
and everything.
subscription.
This time, just check out Tiger Beat.
Pretty simple.
Pretty straight.
Back catalog.
Yeah, get the back catalog.
They got a lot of material.
Yeah, really hit its peak in the late '80s. That's whenever you want to grab those editions.
Yeah.
Obsessive thoughts.
So, Dr. Stephen Hayes.
Steve.
Right.
Who's
a professor of psychology.
Yeah.
Who I'm sure Jim has issues with.
No, we're fine.
For that reason.
We're great.
Actually, the University of Nevada.
Really?
UNR.
Okay, I definitely
Reno.
need you to, thank you. Jacob
Yes.
corrected you. It is the University of Nevada, Reno.
Nevada, Reno.
Yeah,
yes.
I need you to
Yes.
make sure you
sorry.
complete the sentence, please.
Sorry.
We do not just say University of Nevada. Okay.
I thought it was assumed.
It is
Anyway.
not. You're from Iowa. I'll let it go.
He's
an
one of
idiot.
the leading researchers
Do not give them that credit.
on acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT. All right. So, actually, I came across an article that he wrote in Psychology Today where he was talking about obsessive thoughts. And some of this has to do with OCD, which it sounds like our writer is not really dealing with the
just
compulsiveness.
Yeah.
So, obsessive thoughts and then coupled with compulsive behaviors is the OCD part. But as far as dealing with the obsessive thoughts, he in his article, he had a couple really interesting points, really good points that I liked. The first thing is understanding that nearly all of us have this.
Right.
This is not a disorder to have obsessive thoughts.
Right.
In and of
I absolutely
it's by
do
itself.
this.
Oh yeah,
I am bad about this.
Yeah, and this is something that even sometimes our obsessive thoughts can be very scary. We'll come across. I get this every once in a while where I think of if I'm up someplace really high, like on top of the stratosphere in Vegas, where I have that thought of what if I just jumped?
Which I consider an intrusive thought. Just
right.
Which is under the same umbrella, but just to clarify,
right. Yeah.
If you're looking up Googling words, intrusive thought is what.
But tell me if I'm wrong. You can have an obtrusive thought and it becomes an obsessive thought once you just start dwelling on it.
Yes.
I mean, it just because it kind of jumps into your mind from seemingly nowhere.
Yeah.
It can easily become an obsessive thought.
And Nick jumps off a cliff from seemingly high. Yes.
Yeah, or just having those thoughts of oh my God, what if I did this?
Why did they even have that cliff on top of the stratosphere?
I don't know.
That seems dumb.
Put a guardrail up stratosphere. Jesus.
But there was
OSHA's gonna have a field day with this.
There was a study that was done. Adam Radomski that
nailed it.
That Dr. Hayes talks about in this article, right? Where he found that 94% of college students who he interviewed from 13 different countries, 94% of them reported having obsessive thoughts in the last 3 months.
Oh wow! Yeah.
So it's pretty common.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing is to remember that there's no harm in obsessive thoughts or disturbing thoughts.
Right.
The harm is when we start taking these obsessive thoughts literally and we treat them as if the thoughts alone are harmful.
Right.
Okay. That part is really important. It's kind of the backbone of ACT for the most part is just kind of understanding you have these thoughts, but the thoughts are meaningless by themselves.
Right.
And they're harmless.
Yes.
Even if you have like a really intense thought of like, you see a knife and you're like, what if I just stab somebody?
Right.
Okay, that sounds really scary,
Right.
but that thought by itself is fine.
Yeah.
It's
Thoughts
not
aren't
harmful.
Things. Yeah.
It's not harmful until we start thinking about it as though it is harmful.
Right.
And then we start obsessing over it because it's harmful.
Yes.
Okay. So you take a lot of the power out of it by just kind of having that overall acceptance. Like, oh, I had that thought. That's interesting. Okay. Moving on.
Right.
We set that thought down and then we move on.
Yeah,
but we're not going to beat ourselves up for having that thought.
Right.
Because that reinforces the obsessiveness of it.
Yes.
Right. So 2 tips that he had in this article that he talked about is notice the voice of the dictator within. Okay. So the thought is the dictator that threatens you with anxiety and dread if you don't comply with it.
Right.
Okay. So it's basically kind of setting these ground rules. So creating some sort of distance between you and your thoughts. So meet your uncomfortable feelings with an attitude of self-kindness and open curiosity. Okay. So when you have these thoughts, to just kind of be kind to yourself, you're not a bad person for having that thought.
Right.
You just had that thought, and explore it with some curiosity, but not with a sense of judgment.
Notice the thought as if it's passing in front of you, not as if it is you.
Right. Exactly. And then this kind of deals more with the compulsiveness part of it, the second tip, but carrying out your own declaration of independence. So when you have that thought and that thought turns into, I need to act on this, to kind of reinforce the idea that I'm going to do the opposite of this.
Right.
I'm going to force myself to do the opposite of this to prove to myself that this thought is not harmful.
Yeah, that's solid. That's a really good treatment on an OCD especially, but the first half of OCD, which is the obsessive thoughts. So, I mean, I think a lot of humans relate to this. It's a short question, but I think a lot of people find themselves, just having an obsessive thought over and over again. It could be scary. What if they're cheating on me? What if they're cheating on me? Are they cheating me right now? Why aren't they answering the phone? What if they're cheating on me? It could be, something like, oh my God, what if I'm sick? Am I sick? What's my heart rate at? Am I having a heart attack? That leads to anxiety, and those might be described as obsessive. You could have obsessive thoughts where, you're just constantly stuck on an idea. OCD thoughts tend to be threatening. They tend to be bad. It's not just sitting around thinking, I wonder if the Cubs will win the World Series. Like, that's usually not an obsessive thought. An obsessive thought is like, I wonder if there's germs on my hands. Maybe I should. And then if you go out and wash them, you're doing the behavior.
There's a
part.
Sense of danger or something.
Usually.
Some sort of a threat.
They're usually negative. Right. Yeah. So I think generally, writer, if you find yourself obsessing where your thoughts are cyclical and they cannot be interfered with, I have a couple of tricks that I'll use to break an obsessive cycle for myself. One of them is called the what if. And so I find if my obsessive thoughts are what if based, like what if this happens, what if that happens, I will realize to myself I can do no good sitting here imagining simulations of possibilities. Because that doesn't represent reality, so I'm just literally wasting my time. So if I'm going to waste my time anyway, I may as well play a game. And so what I'll do is I'll do the what if game, where I take all the letters of the 2 words what and if, and I try to think of words that start with those letters that match category. So I'll start with like animals, and I'll be like W, whale, H, armadillo, A,
armadillo.
Words.
T. Armadillo.
Tarmadillo. Iguanadillo. I just make words.
Boy, Nick, it was really mean of you to make Jim list animals like that. Oh, wait, hold on. I'm getting my... Oh, wait, that was Jim's example.
That was his own example.
My example. Or I'll do categories like countries or like food.
A.
Alabama.
Countries, yes.
And food. Depends on what you're going through. So, yeah. So, anyway, writer, that's one trick, to kind of interfere, I think, helps interfering with obsessive thoughts. Some people, if they have sticky thoughts or obsessive thoughts, they'll literally put a rubber band on their wrist, and they might give themselves a quick snap, and that's fine. It's not harm. That's a way to break a thought cycle. Sometimes we need that external kind of cue to stop it, and that helps. Some people will clap and shake and just kind of let that be a clearing motion for their mind. So there's lots of different levels, folks, of obsessive thoughts. Sometimes it's bigger cycles of OCD kind of things. Sometimes it's just intrusive thoughts where these yucky ideas pop into our heads and they scare us. And sometimes it's this cyclical, I can't stop thinking about this kind of thing. And it's okay to use those cues, like the what if strategy, the clapping, the rubber band, foot stomping, things like that, music, or riddles. Some people will like say, they'll call out to their home speaker and be like, tell me a joke, or something like that. And there's ways to kind of break that cycle. So, but it's something that gets better over time, friend. The less that you kind of click on the pop-up ad of that thought, the more your brain starts to let it go. And over time, it actually becomes less frequent, less sticky. So it does get better. But there are some strategic techniques that you could do. So good question. Thanks for writing in.
Yeah, hopefully that helps.
Here at the end of the show, we have some stuff to share with the audience. Hopefully we get to all of it. We have a letter that came in, which is pretty good. And we also have some reviews to share with you as well. So we got a letter from one of our therapy producers. At the end of our show, you always hear us list a bunch of names. Those are folks that finance the show at $20 or more. And they do that to help us make it possible at the end of the day. And so we call them our therapy producers because they're producing the show. And one of our longest-serving therapy producers is Jake, Jake Schneider, and his wife Judy. So they're one of the power couples of Pod Therapy. And Jake recently sent us a very random email. Hey, I keep hearing Jim worry about people referring to you as the PodTherapyGuys instead of just PodTherapy. Obviously, your email address is the source of the worry. I've got the answer. I recently got drunk and registered a few novelty domain names, and I can set you up with one of the following email addresses if you like. Here are our options. podtherapy@donkey.fans. AskJim@pork.city.
Good.
Therapy@boner.rodeo. Let me know, Jake Schneider.
I feel like they're all pretty solid.
I think therapy@boner.rodeo is great. That'll clear up the confusion right away. Yeah. Welcome to Pod Therapy. If you want to email us, just send your thoughts to therapy@boner.rodeo.
I also feel like that'll clear up that criticism from your colleague.
Yeah. Yeah, everything will be fine. Yeah, there's no way I'm getting any hate mail on that. Yeah, it's fine. Thanks, Jake. Great suggestion. We'll take a vote on that.
Should do? Yeah, we should register one of these specifically just for complaints.
Oh yeah. And that's if you have complaints, send it to therapy@boner.rodeo. Boner Rodeo. I love that he was just sitting there.
Name.
He was just sitting there getting drunk on his patio, and I just imagine Jake just pulling out his phone, just be like going to GoDaddy, and he's like, "Yeah, let's just grab some." It's like these 99-cent domain names. He's like, "Yeah, whatever." You never know if you're going to need them, And I don't want to be the guy who didn't have it. If Boner Rodeo becomes important, I want to be the guy who had that domain. So fantastic, Jake. Thank you. We also got some reviews. We got some reviews on Facebook and some recent ones. We got one from Carla. Carla did give us 1 star on Facebook. She said, unfortunately, this podcast is full of harmful diet culture and weight-based stigma. Intuitive eating is the harm reduction approach to weight and body issues, but these guys aren't remotely interested. Just lots of old-fashioned body shaming and behavior modification. Real quick, I messaged Carla and I said, hey, could you email me with some more feedback? I'm interested in this topic.
Clarify.
She did. She did a great job. She sent us a long email and said, hey, here's what I'm talking about. Here's some books. Here's some references. There you go. And so she said in there, like, listen, I do like your show, but here's my personal story and here's why I'm ultra sensitive to this and I just expect better. And so I just said, hey, thanks. Thanks for the feedback. I ended up looking into some of the resources she gave me. I thought they were interesting. Just take the lumps, So I'm prepared to take the lumps. Of course, you guys can say whatever you want, but I don't care.
I'm curious.
That's fair. She did specifically mention she don't like Jacob.
Great.
Did she? No, she didn't.
No. I assumed that part.
Everybody likes Jacob.
I know.
Nobody ever gets pissed. Nobody's like, how could Jacob say that? Nobody cares, It just makes me mad because like Trump gets away with the same thing.
Low bar.
Yeah, there's no bar.
Low bar.
Yeah, I make a penis joke and people are like, you need to carry yourself like a therapist. Jacob does whatever he wants. And they're like, well, yeah, no, that's life coach. He's doing whatever. He's life coach.
Yeah. It's like Pam from The Office, where she was talking about Michael Scott. And she's like, yeah, no one blames the 5-year-old who gets in the car and kills a whole bunch of people.
They blame the parents.
They blame the parents.
No, I'm just curious. I would love some examples.
The person specifically heard an episode where we were talking about diet ideas and different ways that we've all kind of worked on that in the past. You gave an example of being at the store and imagining what the clerk would say to you whenever you're checking out. That didn't sit well because she thought, okay, that sounds like shaming. Why are you teaching the audience to shame? And, I probably could have written back and said, hey, that wasn't the intention. I don't think the audience heard that. I think they were hearing us spitballing different mental tricks that we use to keep ourselves accountable. But that was her whole point. She's saying, that doesn't work well for me. The theory that works well for me is something called intuitive eating, which has to do with non-judgment whatsoever. I don't even count my calories. I eat only when I am physiologically hungry, and I've trained myself to notice what physiologically hungry feels like. And when physiologically full happens, I stop eating.
Didn't I say that on that show?
It's very unlikely you said anything like this.
That sounds smart.
Way too smart. Way too smart.
Okay.
We have other reviews.
All right.
Joe Pangrazio gave us 5 stars on Facebook and said this. Nick is a thoughtful, intelligent host, and Jacob gives a funny but insightful lay perspective. Jim, well, we try not to talk about Jim. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks.
Andrea Anderson gave 5 stars on Facebook.
I don't need any examples on that one.
No, that's fine. Yeah, that checks out.
That one's pretty clear.
It's self-evident. Andrea Anderson gave us 5 stars. She said, approachable guys to ask questions and get positive feedback. 5 stars. Also, very comfortable chairs. She and her husband, Kevin, have been in the studio before.
It's
a great episode with Andrea.
Interestingly enough,
she
had the least comfortable chair in the studio and still said they were comfortable chairs.
Yeah. You think that she's just doing us a favor on that? Yeah, that's true. Well, it says
not for us.
A comfortable chair.
Maybe her ass sensitivity is like finely tuned to the point where even bad chairs are fine. She doesn't care. Maybe that's what it was. Could have given her a stool and she'd probably been like, yes, whatever. Maybe she's just not a high maintenance person. There could be that too. Also, I think they're both. I think Kevin's her husband. He's I think crushing in our fantasy league.
Yeah,
I'm getting wrecked.
I know I'm not.
Jacob's killing. Jacob wrecked Smitty. And, I think, Jacob, you might be undefeated at this point.
I don't think
I
think
I've
lost one.
No one's undefeated.
Okay.
I think everybody's got one loss.
Yeah.
And everybody's got at least one win, so.
Okay, yeah. So it's pretty
We're
mixed
all
bag.
Equally terrible.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, God, the injuries have been crazy. Well, we are at the end of the show. We do want to thank folks that have been supporting us. This episode is coming out in a timely way, so I think for the most part we're caught up. We have a new TheraPal. We got Tobias. I'm going to go with Villegas.
Villegas.
That feels right.
Yeah.
2 L's? Villegas.
Yeah.
Okay. TheraPal Tobias Villegas. Thanks, Tobias.
Welcome.
We also have a new Therodactyl. Hell yes! Scott Jameson. Welcome to the party. Join the gaggle. And you too can follow Alpha Goose, Nick Tangeman.
That's right.
You know that Kate actually sent me a drawing of the Alpha Goose?
Oh, really?
Yeah, as soon as she heard the episode, she texted and she's like, hey, I'm drafting the Alpha Goose right now. It's like, shows me like a pen and paper and she's like, I'm working on it. It was really good. The Alpha Goose was like smoking a cigarette and he had sunglasses on.
Right on.
I was like, this feels right.
That's
I want that to go on a leather jacket in our merch store, which doesn't exist.
Absolutely.
Oh,
and we especially want to thank our bosses, the Elite 8 Mysterious and Shrouded Illuminati members of our fan club, the Thera producers. Thank you, Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Robert Brownie Jr., Mentz, Kayla Lansbury, Ellie O'Dare, Judy Schneider, Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Don, and ex officio board member, Crazy Manana Scoop.
If you'd like to hear the episode uncut and unedited, and especially our pre-show and post-show, you can go to patreon.com/therapy, and thank you for supporting mental health. That's all the time that we have for this week's session. We want to thank our landlords, the Ice Cream Social Podcast, and thanks to those of you who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, PodTherapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Share this episode with someone who needs it by opening the episode's description in your podcast app and copying and pasting that link we provided into your social media. Don't forget, you can find us on Facebook.com/PodTherapy, on Twitter at PodTherapyGuys, at Instagram at PodTherapyGuys. And don't forget to write us at therapy.bonerrodeo. Boner.rodeo. Or go to patreon.com/therapy.
Do you want to submit a question to the show? Ask anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com.
I'm speaking at the Mars 2020 conference. Go to marssociety.org and
That's
join
Jim.
me October 15th, 2 p.m. It's free.
Thanks, and we'll see you for an appointment next week.
Shout out to Robbie Rist, who played Cousin Oliver on the Brady Bunch
Ah.
and went on to be the voice of Michelangelo in
What?
the Ninja Turtle movies.
Really?
Yeah.
And he landed on his feet.
Wow, yeah, he did.